Well, hello Internet, and welcome to my ultimate PHP tutorial. In this one tutorial, you're going to learn pretty much everything you could ever want to learn about PHP. I'm going to also cover MySQL and interacting with MySQL and PHP and a whole lot more. Underneath the video, you're going to find a table of contents. You can click and jump directly to whatever specifically you would like to learn. And this is basically going to be about a 600-700 page book all crammed into one video. And I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Alright, so like always, all the code is in the description, and also everything's going to work exactly the same on Windows and Mac, and I have an installation video if you want to have the exact setup that I have for both Windows and Mac in the description. And I'm going to be using the Atom text editor. You can use any text editor that you would like, but if you want Atom, just go to atom.io. It is free, download, the installation is very simple. So I have some basic HTML here, which I'm guessing you understand. This is basically just defining we're using English and our character set and the title that's going to show up. And then we're going to start writing some PHP code. All right, so if you want to embed some PHP code inside of your HTML file, it's actually going to be called tut1.php. It's actually labeled as a PHP program. You're just going to use this opening brace and this closing brace. Any PHP code that you want to run before the HTML, just place it before your HTML code. And basically, variables are going to start with a $sign like this. And then after that, you're going to have a letter. So we could have something like first name. And then after that first letter, you can have letters, numbers, as well as underscores to define the name for your variables. Now, the data type that is going to be assigned to your variables is going to be based off of whatever type of information you put inside of it. So if I put in a string of characters, this is automatically going to be considered a string. If I would, however, go back and change it thereafter into an integer, well, it's going to then be referred to as an integer data type. And basically, you're going to have your string types, like here I'll create another string type. You're also going to have integers. So I can define an integer, which is just a number without a decimal place. You're also going to be able to define floats, which are numbers with decimal places. We can have booleans, which are going to be either true or false. We're also going to be able to define arrays. So these are just going to be a series of values that are going to have keys and values assigned to them. So we'll have a key here, which we'll call street. And then you can go and place additional information inside of there. And it doesn't matter what your data type is. So I can come in here and define a key for city and then assign yet another string to that. And we'll get way more into arrays as we continue. If you would come in and define a value of null, that's just going to signify that the variable has no value. And we're also going to be able to come in and define constants that once set, the value cannot change. And I move pretty quickly in these tutorials, so get prepared to hit the pause button. Just so you know, this guy right here is just going to tell the browser to render using the HTML5 spec. This is saying that we are going to be using English. This is going to define that we're using the UTF-8 character set. Here's the title for PHP, and so forth and so on. Now we'll jump down into the body and start placing some additional PHP code in here. And to display inline inside of the HTML, what we're going to do, let's say we wanted to go and create a paragraph and throw name inside of there. We would then be able to go and get the name that we define just by going PHP echo, and if I want to put the first name, that the value assigned to first name, which I defined up here directly inside of here, I would just go and list that variable name. I can throw a space in there. I can combine the different strings using just dots or periods. I could then also go L and name, and then you're going to close off your PHP code with that tag, and then we'll close off the paragraph with that tag. And if we go over here and reload it, you can see that it automatically is going to print out my name. And I enlarged it so you can see it a little bit easier. You're also going to be able to pass data to a PHP script using forms. And I'm going to cover passing data using the get operation as well as the post. Get, as you're going to see, is going to pass values through the URL inside of an array. And mainly you should use get in any situation in which you want to allow the user to bookmark the page, and use post anytime that you would resend any data to the server. If the user ever tries to send data to the server multiple times, they will be warned in that situation. But we're going to use both just so you'll be able to see what both of them look like. So I'm just going to come in here and create a form. An action is going to say basically that I want to call this PHP script that I am currently using. So I'll just say tut1.php, which is the name of the file that we are currently inside of. And in this situation, I'm going to use the get method, which you define just by saying method get. Then inside of here, I can go, well, make sure that I close my form tag. And then inside of here, I can create some labels that will show up. And I'm going to show you some insecure as well as secure ways of passing form data back and forth, just so you can see everything. Go and allow the user to input a state in this situation. And I'll give it the name of state so I can refer to it. Close that off. Throw in a new line there with break. And then I'm going to go and do this a couple more times. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to allow the user to come in and enter numbers and perform different mathematical calculations on those numbers. And I'll call this num1. And then I'm going to go and create a number 2 as well. Call this number 2 and call this number 2. After that, we can throw in a submit button. Type equal to and submit. Give this a value of submit and close off that tag. Now underneath of our form that we just created, like I said, I'm going to show you some insecure ways of passing information and then some more secure ways of passing information. If you would like to come in here and check that information was passed to our web page, let's go and throw this on a separate line, and let's close off this PHP tag as well. You could say if is set and get and array key exists, and specifically look for state get, and then we're going to throw a curly bracket inside of there. And if this comes back as true, what I'm going to do is assign the value that was passed for state from our form above to our variable that we have here by referring to the array that's going to contain all the values passed, which is also going to have num1 and num2. I can come in here and verify state's existence and also verify that the value assigned to state is not empty by going not empty. That's what that exclamation mark means. And there's state. And then I can come in and go echo and say something like you live in space dot, and I'm going to show you numerous different ways to output information as well. And then I'll say that I want the state to print out there. I'm just sort of sticking with echo right now just because it's used a lot. And then let's go and throw echo here. You're also going to be able with echo to go and use double quotes, and in that situation you'll be able to embed the variable values directly inside of your output, and that's specifically when you use double quotes with echo. So here I'll say f name lives in, and also do the same thing with state. And also we can throw break statements inside of there, so everything's contained all in one area and you don't need to use all these dots. Another thing I want to do is I want to check how many values are inside of my array that was passed. So I'll figure out how many pieces of data that were passed from the user. To do that, I can say if count get is greater than or equal to 3. See, I have 3 pieces of information being passed here. And I'm going to go and perform some different math calculations. So I'm going to say num1 and go and get the value that was passed from that. And I'm going to say num1, and we'll do the same thing for num2. Just change this to num2 and change this to num2. And now let's go and output some information. So I'm going to say num1 plus num2 is equal to, then outside of there, I'm going to make that calculation. So I'll say num1 plus, inside of the parentheses that you see there, num2. And then after that, throw a break statement inside of it. And we can go and perform multiple different calculations. Let's just go and I'll show you what all those look like. There's 5 of them, so let's go negative, and we'll also go and get that. And we'll go multiplication with a star and another one. And we'll do division and modulus, which is going to give you the remainder of a division. And I guess I should also do another one. You can also do integer division, which is basically just going to throw away the remainder. So I'll throw that right there. And then inside of here, I will say int division, and then get rid of this parentheses and put it here instead. And if we reload the screen, I can throw PA inside of there. And then I'm going to throw 5 and 4, submit. And I made a little error. I forgot to put in the $signs in front of this, very important. So just throw $signs in front of all of your variables at all times. And I went and threw in some values inside of here and click on submit. And you can see you live in PA, Derek lives in PA. Whoop, got another warning down here. Instead of plus inside of there, throw in a comma. And now you can see that it works. And we're performing all those different calculations just like you would expect. You're also going to be able to perform calculations using numerous different shortcuts. So I'm going to throw echo inside of there, and I'm going to say that I want to increment num1. Get rid of this. And you can increment the value of number 1 just by coming in and throwing in 2 plus signs. That's going to make it go up. And you're going to see something interesting here whenever this output's on the screen. And we can also decrement num1 by putting 2 minus signs inside of there. And I'm going to show you a couple other different shortcuts. The following, if you would say I plus or equal to 1, is going to work exactly the same if you would go I plus equal to I plus 1. So there's another one, and you can do this with division or subtraction or any of those other different options, as well as modulus. And why don't I cover a whole bunch of other math functions that are available. And if I reload the screen, you're going to see live in PA, Derek lives in PA, all of those other different things we covered. You're going to see here the increment is not showing this as 6. The reason why is what it does whenever you put this plus sign on the right side is it actually outputs the current value assigned to number 1 and then increments it. And that's why you see that this shows up as 6, because the same thing happens whenever we have a decrement right here. So it prints the value, then it increments. It prints the value, then it decrements. Okay, so let's just make that clear. And then here are a whole bunch of built-in math functions that we have, and you can see exactly how to set those up. And I'll scroll this up. You can see we can get the absolute value. We can see that there's numerous ways to round. Ceiling is going to round up, floor is going to round always down, and round is going to round either up or down depending upon if this first decimal place here is a 5 or some other value. You can see we can get the max, the min, take 4 to the power of 2. We can get square roots, get the exponent of e. We can perform logarithmic calculations, and there's the different logarithm calculations we can perform. You can see that pi is actually built in as a constant. We can go and find a hypotenuse. We can convert from degrees to radians and radians to degrees. There's multiple different random number generators. This one right here is a really fast random number generator. It's going to generate values from 1 to 50. And you can see down here, it came back as 1. If I reload that, you can see now it comes back as 41. Here's the original random number generator. If you're used to PHP in the past, this is probably what you've seen. You can see here, this is going to return the maximum random number that can be generated. You can see if a value is infinite or finite. You can also check if a value is numeric. You can also see here that I have double quotes inside of there. Anytime you want to use double quotes inside of double quotes, just put a backslash and double quotes again. And there are numerous different trig functions that are also available that you can also see right there on your screen. Like I said, all the code is available in the description, or you can pause your video and type all of this out. And now I'm going to show you a way to format your information in regards to decimals and working with them and outputting them on the screen. So let's say you wanted to define how many decimal places actually show. I'm going to go echo number. There's actually multiple different ways to do this as well, as you're going to see here in a minute. So let's say you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, and you only want 2 decimal places to show up, just throw a 2 inside of there, period, which is going to combine these 2 pieces of output. I'm going to throw in a break statement, save that, reload it, and you can see that it rounded it to just 2 decimal places. All right, so cool stuff. And now what I want to do is talk about using conditionals. Now the commands of if, and else are going to be used to execute different blocks of code depending upon multiple different conditions, as you'll see. And you're going to be able to use conditional operators to compare different conditions, different values, as well as use logical operators, as you'll see. You can also see here that I'm using a hash symbol to comment out my code, to place comments, and you can also use 2 forward slashes if you would prefer. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to define number of oranges. And basically what I'm going to do in this example is calculate different discounts based off of the amount of oranges and bananas that were purchased by a customer. So let's say the customer purchased 4 oranges as well as 36 bananas. What I'm going to say is if the number of oranges is greater than 25 and the number of bananas is greater than 30, well, in that situation, I am going to give them a 25% discount and throw in a break statement there. Then what I can do is list a secondary condition. So if this one comes back as false, well, I'm not going to print this out, obviously. And I'm also going to give another opportunity for some other discount to be available. However, if this comes back as true, we never even go down here. So let's come in and create another condition. I'm going to say else if number of oranges is greater than 30, or, so I can have either or of these come back as true, and then I will give another discount. Number of bananas is greater than 35. Well, in that situation, and you can see here the curly brackets, the only code that's going to be executed if this comes back as true or this comes back as true is the code inside the curly brackets. Well, here, I'm just going to copy this. In this situation, I will provide a 15% discount. And then we can continue onwards, else if, and here I'll say not, and what not is going to do is turn a true into a false or a false into true. So I'll say not, and then I'll have conditions inside of here. So I'll say oranges less than 5, or, and then again, number of bananas less than 5. So if they order at least 5 oranges or 5 bananas, well, in that situation, I will give them a discount, but it's going to be only 5%. Then, if none of those things come back as true, this is the only way this will execute. And if it does, I will say no discount. And if we reload our page, you can see they get a 15% discount. All right, so cool stuff. And now I'll show you another way of working with conditionals, and that will be with the switch statement. So the switch statement is going to provide output for a limited number of options, but you can actually tweak it and get it to do even better stuff, as you'll see. So let's say that a customer requests a Coke. What I can do is say, based off of that request, case, so in case the value of request is equal to Coke, well, in that situation, I am going to echo out onto the screen, here is your Coke. Then what we're going to do is type in break, which is going to break us out of checking anything else. Now, another option we could have here. I have no idea why anyone would ever request a Pepsi over a Coke, but if somebody did, I can say, here is your Pepsi. And then after that, I can say default, if they don't request either one of those things, I can come in and say, here is your water, and break out of that. And if we reload it, you can see that they asked for a Coke. However, you will be able to use really cool things inside of switch, such as conditions. So let's say I am instead going to tell students what grade they should go to based off of an age value. So I'm going to say age is equal to 12. And then I'm going to, inside of our switch statement, change this to true. So what this is going to do is basically, if a condition down here comes back with a value of true, it is going to perform those calculations. So it's sort of doing things in the opposite direction. So I'll be able to do something like case age is less than 5. Well, in that situation, I can stay home. And then case age is equal to 5. In that situation, I can say go to kindergarten. And let's go and have even more conditions. I could also come in and create a range of values. So I'm going to say case in array. An array is going to take an array, or in this situation, a range, and it's going to see if a value is inside of it. So I'm going to say if the value for age is inside of a range of values from 6 to 17, well, in that situation, I'm going to calculate the grade that they should go into. So I'll say grade is equal to age minus 5, and then I'll put on our screen, go to grade and whatever the value of grade is. Of course, followed with a break statement. And then another break statement. And then after that, I can say default. If none of those things apply, go to college. All right, so good stuff. And you can see if I reload it that I get go to grade 7 shows up, and that's because I assigned the value of 12 to the variable age. The ternary operator is going to be able to assign either one or another value based off of a condition. So let's say I wanted to find out if somebody could vote. What I would do is say that I want to check the age. I guess I should have left this inside of here. Age is equal to 12. So if age is greater than or equal to 18, then I'm going to put a question mark. If that comes back as true, I'm going to assign the value of can vote to the variable can vote. Otherwise, if it comes back as false, I'm going to mark this as can't vote. So it's just a either or way of assigning one value or another. And then I can just say vote and then put can vote inside of there. And you can see can't vote shows up. All right, so cool stuff. Another thing to be aware of is there's something called the identical operator, and that is going to be 3 equal signs in a row. The way that's going to work is it's only going to return true if the value as well as the data type are exactly the same. So for example, if I said if 10, which is a string, is equal to 10, now normally with just 2 equal signs, that's going to come back as true. But if I say echo, they are equal, and I'll show you both things here in a second, else they aren't equal. Reload, they aren't equal, but if I change that to just 2 equal signs, they come back as being equal. Just something to be aware of if you want to verify that data types as well as values are equal. And now I want to show you some cool things we can do with printf. Now, printf is going to provide another way to format our output by basically defining what data types are expected to be printed out. So I'll just say printf with parentheses. This guy right here is called a type specifier, and what I'm saying here is I expect a character to be printed. D is going to represent an integer. I'm going to be able to say that I want to use floating point types, and I only want to show 2 decimal places. And also, we can use strings. Now what I'm going to be able to do is outside of here, I go comma, and this is going to be the character code for 65, which you're going to see here in a second. I can also go and print out an integer, 1.234. It's going to cut off the 4 though when it outputs it. And then I can just say string, reload it, and you can see the character code for 65 is representative of the A, and it prints the integer, prints the float like we like it, and prints the string. And you're going to see a lot more with printf starting now when we talk about strings. All right, so you know that strings are just going to store a series of characters. So let's go and create a random string. And I'm going to throw some extra white space here just to show you how to get rid of that extra white space. So if you would like to get the number of characters in a string, you could do something like this, and we could say length, and it's going to be an integer. Then we would say string length, and throw inside of here our random string. Let's go and do a whole bunch more of these. Let's say that we would want to trim the white space to the left. We come in and say trim L, and then actually let's leave this as length so you can see the length changed. And we'll leave this as string length, but inside of here I'll say L trim, which is going to trim the white space on the left of our string. Likewise, we will be able to trim the space on the right. So let's change this to R trim. We could also come in and trim all the white space. So we'll say random string is equal to trim, and then throw in our random string again. We're also going to be able to output all of our string information in all uppercase letters. Just change this to string. Get rid of this. Get rid of these extra parentheses, which if you have too many parentheses, you will get an error. And then str to upper, and you're going to find out what these functions are here in a minute whenever I cover functions in detail. And lower, and then just change this to lower. So string to upper, string to lower. We would also be able to come in and just have the first character set for uppercase. To do that, you say UC first. We're going to be able to come in and let's say that we would want to get characters starting at the very first one to the end. Let's go and change this to first 6. So the first 6 characters inside of our string. Well, that would be a sub-string smaller than the main string. And what we would do is just put random string. If you want to get the first character, you would put a 0. And if you wanted to get up to the 6th, you would put a 6 inside of there. That's a lot of information. Let's run this. You can see how the different sizes of the strings were affected by trimming the white space. You can see there is in uppercase, there is in lowercase. That is with the first character set to uppercase. And you can see how we grabbed the first 6 characters out of our string. Of course, there's way more functions. Let's say that we would want to get the location of a string, and these are referred to as indexes. So this would be the first index or the first character. This would be the 6th index or the 6th character. More on that is whenever we get into arrays, which is coming immediately after I cover strings. So what I want is the index or the character number that represents where we are trying to search for a string. And this guy is string position. And again, you just pass in random string you want to search for. And then in this situation, the string that we are looking for, which is the word string. We would also be able to come in and replace one string with another string. So I can say random string is equal to string replace. And I'm going to say that I want to replace string with the string characters. And then put in random string, which is the string that we're working with. And it will do that for us. And we can go replace. And then this is just going to be random string. I just want to show the fact that it went and actually changed that part of our string for us. And then we're also going to be able to compare strings. So let's go printf, and we'll say A equal to B. And then we'll throw a D inside of here, which is going to give us our Boolean value in this situation. And this is string compare. And what we're specifically checking is the string that has A inside of it and the string that has B inside of it. Reload it. You can see here index 7 is where we are going to find the beginning of string. You can see here that we went and changed random string into random characters. And you can see here whenever we tried to compare these two strings, we got a value of -1. You would get a value of 0 in the situation in which they're equal. You would get a positive value if the first string was greater than the second string, or a negative value in this situation in which the first string is less than the second string. All right, so we'll be doing way more with strings as the tutorial continues, but now I want to talk about arrays. All right, so on to arrays. Now, arrays, as I have mentioned previously, store multiple values. So let's say I create an array called friends. I'm going to follow that up with the word array, and then I don't have to use key value pairs. I can just go and throw anything inside here that I would want, and these would then be given index values. Now you're going to be able to access them just by going and listing whatever the array name is, and then the very first index is going to be 0. And we could throw a break statement inside of there. And let's go and do a couple other things. You're going to be able to add values. So I could say that I have a friend named Steve, which I did once. And there we are. I can also cycle through the arrays. I'm going to get more into looping here in a second. But basically what this does is it says for each friend, as I cycle through the array, I want to temporarily store each friend in a variable called f. And then what I can do is just come in and say printf, and I'll be able to get each of the individual friends out of it and print them on the screen just by referring to f inside of that printf statement. Let's go and do a couple more. Now, as I said, I can go and assign key value pairs, which are sometimes very useful, just by listing the key and then a little arrow looking thing and then whatever I want to put inside of it. Would be kind of funny if I actually did live at 123 main. And there we go. And then I would also be able to use for each to output the keys and the values. So once again, the array that I'm working with, and then the key and the value. And then we can come in and print all that information. And I'm just going to come in here and throw a string and a string inside of there, and then change this to K, and then change or add on a V. I think that's enough information. Let's reload it, and you can see how we are outputting all of that information. Now you're also going to be able to combine arrays. So I'm going to say friends. My current array that already exists. Well, you know what? I'm going to call this friends2, and I am going to list Doug as a friend. Then I can go and add Doug to my already established friends array just by saying friends, the original array, and friends2, the array I just created. There, now they're all going, or Doug's basically going to be put inside of friends. You're going to be able to sort the array. In this situation, it would be in ascending order. I would also be able to reverse sort these array items by just going reverse sort. So that would be in descending order. I would also be able to sort by key values. And to do that, you just go A sort. And that A stands for associative array. And that would store, or it would sort by value. And I could go and, of course, I'm going to have to put me info inside of there. And also I would be able to sort by my key by just putting a K inside of there. You're also going to be able to come in here and type in a R sort and KR sort for descending if you would like to sort in descending order. We're also going to be able to have multi-dimensional arrays. So let's go and create customers is equal to array. And then you'll put an array inside of an array, which I actually kind of like how this works versus how other languages create multi-dimensional arrays. And then you put a comma, and then you put in another array. And let's say that she lives at 122 main. There you go. Now you have a multi-dimensional array. Now let's go and say we want to cycle through it. What I can do is say that I want to get my rows. You're going to see more about for loops here in a second. But basically what it's going to do is it's going to start off creating a variable with a value of 0. And it's going to continue to cycle as long as row is less than 2. And whenever row gets a value greater than 2, it's going to stop. We're going to increment this. And then we're going to do pretty much exactly the same thing for our column. So just change this to column. And everything else will be changed to column as well as we go through here. And then after I have all of that set up, I can just go echo and customers and say that I want to deal with a row and a column. And then let's say that I want to go and have all of this information divided up with commas. Do it like that. Probably a nice idea to tab that in. And then after each one of these, I could just go echo and throw break statements inside of there. Reload it, and you can see all that information. Let's do some more stuff. You could also turn a string into an array. So I'm going to say let letter string is equal to, and I'm going to go A, B, C, and D. It's very important to have spaces, otherwise you won't know how to break this information up. Or you could have commas, just anything that separates. Then what you do is say explode, and you're going to define first how the information will be exploded, and that's going to be based off of spaces and letter string. Now we can come in once again and say for each letter array as, and I'm just going to have this assigned to L, and I'll use printf here again, and I can now put the individual letters. This is going to be a string break, and then I'll say that I want to output the letter. Also, on top of that, you're going to be able to turn an array into a string. So let's go letter string 2 is equal to, and you're going to use implode. Here, we're going to decide that we want to have spaces between all of our information. And we're going to use the letter array to convert from an array to a string. And now I can come in and output that information as well, which is going to be our letter string 2. We're going to be able to come in and check if a key exists. So we can say printf and key exists, throw a D inside of there, and then we will say array key exists, and make sure you spell array correctly. And then what we can do is what we're searching for, which is going to be name, and the array that we're searching for, or searching through, which is my me info. And then once again, we're going to be able to check if a value is inside of an array. Let's just copy this. And I'm just going to say in array in this situation. And this becomes in array. And I'll search for Joy inside of my friends array to see if she is my friend or not. And there is all that information. And of course, the one is represented with a value of true. All right, so there you go. And I said I was going to talk about loops, so let's talk about loops now. Now, you already saw a little bit about for loops. I'm going to show you some more, but first I want to talk about while loops. Basically, a while loop is going to execute as long as a condition is true. And one thing that's special about a while loop is you're going to have the thing you're checking for outside of your loop. Then we're going to say, let's say we want to cycle as long as I is less than 10. Again, curly brackets. And then let's just echo out values. I'm going to put the plus sign in the front so that it's actually going to increase the value of I first and then print it, unlike what you saw previously. And then I'm just going to put a dot here and a comma. And then after it goes and cycles through all those, we are going to print out a break statement. For loops, on the other hand, as you saw, are going to compact everything down into the one statement. You also saw for each previously. So I'm going to do the same thing with a for loop, except in this situation, I will increment after. And let's do some other things inside of here. I'm going to say that I only want to print odd numbers. And one way to do that, this is something useful that you'll do sometimes. I'm going to say if the value of I modulus 2 is equal to 0, which would be every single even number would give you that, meaning it has no remainder if divided by 2. I'm going to say that I want to continue. And what continue means is that I want to jump back up here to this loop, which is going to increment the value of I and then loop again. Let's say that I want to break completely out of the loop if ever I is equal to 7. Well, I can just go and put break here. If you're going to do a single statement after an if, you don't have to use curly brackets, by the way. And otherwise, I'm going to say that I want to print the value of I. And again, I'll separate with commas. And then also, I will put another break statement here. And if I run it, you can see exactly the output that we receive. I talked about for each to show how it is easy to cycle through arrays with it, so I don't really see any point in covering it. I'll probably do something with for each later on in the tutorial, but you already saw it, so, what the heck. There's also the do while, which is guaranteed to echo or execute at least one time all of the code between the curly brackets. So I'm going to say do while and just a value inside of there. And just to prove that it is going to work, I'm going to say while I is greater than 0. Well, guess what? In this situation, just to start off, I is already equal to 0. So this should never execute except the do while guarantees that it will. And you can see that it does. And you also saw how to cycle through multi-dimensional arrays, so I don't really see any point in going more into looping at this point. Of course, it'll come up as the tutorial continues, but instead I want to talk about functions. Now, functions are going to allow you to reuse your code, and a function name must begin with a letter, but it's also going to be able to contain numbers and underscores just like variables. And how you create one is you type function, and let's say I want to add numbers. And I'm going to receive, this is called a parameter, number 1. So this is going to be a value that is passed to this function. However, I can say something like, if a value isn't passed, I want to assign a value of 0 to it. So it's a default value of sorts. And then I can also define another value that's supposed to be passed and also give it a default value of 0. Then what return's going to do is return whatever we put after it. So if I say I want to return the result of adding these two numbers together, that's how you do it. Then I'm going to be able to come in here and say something like 5 plus 4 is equal to, get that value, and then call for the function to execute. And it will return a value that I will then put where I have the % and the D. And I'll put 5 and 4 inside of there. Run it, and you can see it works. All right, so that's a basic function. Don't worry, we're going to get into more complicated things. One thing that's important to understand, however, is that by default, function are basically attributes that are passed to functions are passed by value. And let me demonstrate this. I'm going to create a function called changeMe, and I'll have change be a parameter passed to it. And I'm going to say that I want to get the value of change and change it to 10. Now outside of this, I'm going to create change and give it a value of 5. Then I'm going to call changeMe and pass change inside of it. And then what we're going to do is see what the value of change is after we called that function. Now you might think that it would be 10 because that's what it assigned, but you would be wrong. So let's go and say change, and you can see it remains 5. And like I said, the reason why is it passes by value, which means change isn't passed inside of here, 5 is passed inside of here. You will, however, be able to pass by reference, which means a reference to this actual variable's place in memory, just by making a slight change to your function. And you just go up here and put an and sign inside of there, and now run it. And you can see that we were able to change the value even though it resided outside of the function. You're also going to be able to receive a variable number of parameters. So let's say we had a function called getSum, and we didn't know how many values were going to be passed inside of it. We just go 1, 2, 3 like that. And let's call this nums. This is going to convert everything passed into it into an array. Then we could say sum is equal to 0. And then for each, see I said there'd be more looping involved, nums as num, and we can go and get the value of sum plus equal to whatever the next num is. And then after we're done cycling through that, we can just say return sum. Then outside of our function, we can say printf sum is equal to, and go and output that value, and then call our function getSum. And no matter what, no matter how many values you put inside of here, it's just automatically going to work. So you may say, well, that's how you get an unknown number of values or a variable number of values. How do you return multiple values? Create a function again, and I'm going to call it doMath. It's going to get a value of x and y, and what it's going to return is both what happens when you add these values and what happens when you subtract these values. So it's going to return both of those. So how does it do it? Well, simply, it creates an array and goes x plus y, and then x minus y. Put a semicolon after that. And then what we can do is we can say list sum and difference, which is going to create those two variables for us. Call doMath with 5 and 4 passed inside of it. And then we'll be able to come in and just say echo sum is equal to whatever we said the sum is, and do the same thing for the difference. Pretty neat stuff. So difference and difference. And there you can see we got those as well. But wait, there are so many other cool things we can do. let's say that we would like to apply a function to every single value in a list. How would we do that? Well, we could say, go and create a function, and it is going to double whatever's passed to it. So we'll just say return and x times x, or it'll multiply everything times itself. All right, so there we go. Then we're going to create a list, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we'll go and create double list, and how we do it is with map, and it's called array map, and we pass inside of it the function that we want to call, which is called double, and then we passed inside of it the list that we want to have array map operate on. Another thing that's neat is, let's say you wanted to print a human readable version of list. You could use print _r. Doing my best to cover every single thing, and you could do that. And if we run it, you can see that it prints out that array and that we were able to double all of the values in the array. So neat stuff. So we can go and perform the same action on every single value. What about being able to reduce values into in an array into a single value? So what I want to do this time is multiply each value times all of the other values. So I'm just going to change the name of this to mult for multiply, and it's going to be x and y, which are going to be each value inside of the array. So the first value and then the second value, then we'll switch up and that value will move into the x, and then we'll have the third value and so forth. Then we're going to come in and just go like this and then change this to y. Go like this and then return x. So this is a little bit more understandable what's going on. I'm going to leave my list right here, and I'm going to change this to product, prod, and we'll call array reduce. And here, we're just going to switch these up a little bit. Here, we're going to first list our list, then the name of the function we're going to call, and then our default first value, and then change this to prod, right like that. Run it, and you can see it multiplied every single value times every other value in the list in order from 1, 2 to 3 to 4. All right. So now, why don't we go and take a look at how we can filter values. As you remember before, I went and checked if values were even or not. Why don't we go and create a even list. So I'm going to call this is even, and just get one value here because it doesn't make sense to have two. And then inside of here, I'm going to say return, so we can just get rid of this. Return, throw parentheses inside of there, and then say modulus 2, and check if that is equal to 0 or not. And then down here, let's call this even list. Well, let's get rid of that. Let's go and put another one inside of here. So this is going to be even list is going to be equal to, get rid of this altogether, and we will call array filter. Pass inside of it the list we want to work with and the function that we want to have operate on our list items. And then here, we'll just say we want to print our even list after it's done. And there you can see, just have the even values. So neat stuff, whole bunch of different ways to work with functions, and you'll see more later. But now I want to talk about dates. All right, so when we're working with dates, you're probably going to want some time zone information in regards to how PHP works with time zones. So just go to php.net/manual, en timezones.php. All right, and let's go and do some stuff. All right, so what I want to do first is set the time zone that I'm working with, and that's going to be date, default, and time zone, and set, and that's going to be America in my situation, _ York. Then what I'm going to do is show you a whole bunch of different ways to format this information. It's going to be quite repetitive. So I'm going to say date, and then after this, I'll call date, and I'm going to throw an I and an F, an M-D-Y. Let's go and get to all the values. And then I can also get time information. And in regards to where all this comes from, you'll be able to experiment with it just by searching for PHP function date, and you can see the URL right there. And here are all of the different character codes you can use to represent your date in pretty much any way you could ever possibly imagine. I'm going to show you some sometimes with this output that I provide here. Now, not only are you going to be able to work with the current time, but you're also going to be able to create specific times. So I'm going to put the most important date in history inside of here, make time, and I'm going to go 0, 0, 0, and 12, 21, 1974. And then I can say, once again, echo. Why don't I just get this right here? Echo, and we'll put important date, and then follow that up with import date. Whoops, change this to lowercase, and run it. And there you see your information. And the 000, by the way, just represents the very beginning of the day. So, first thing. All right, so there is a lot of information about dates. Now I want to show you how you can include other files inside of your PHP code. So I'm going to create a function here called sayhello.php, and this is going to allow me to go and create PHP code in a separate file that I can just at will just throw anywhere I want. And I'll just say hello right here, called sayhello. That sounds like something good to do with it. Jump back over here. Now anywhere I want that code to show up, all I need to do is go include and say hello, and make sure that it's in the same directory as this. That's it. That's all I need to do. Boom, and there hello shows up. So neat stuff. Pretty simple to include additional files. And now I want to talk about exception handling. Now we are going to use exception handling to basically keep our program from crashing if the user does something crazy. All right, and what we're going to do here is we're going to handle if the user tries to divide by 0. So I'm going to say this receives a value of whatever, or some type of value. And I'm going to say inside of here, if number is equal to 0, well then I want to throw a new exception and say inside of it, the message that's going to be displayed on the screen, you can't divide by 0. And then down inside of here, I'm going to say, otherwise return calc is equal to 100 divided by whatever the number is. So I knew that I couldn't have them, send me a 0. So what I did was I provided output instead of a complete program crash. Now what I can do is inside a try block is where you're going to put any potentially problematic code that could throw an error. Well, in this situation, I'm going to have bad divide, and I'm going to throw a 0 inside of there. Then what I can do is call catch, and in this situation, catch is going to accept any exception that would occur. And whenever it does, in this situation, rather than crashing, it's just going to print out my custom error message that I defined. And I get that custom error message, if I learned how to spell message, there we are, right like this. Reload, and you can see instead of having a blob of mess pop up on the screen, if it just simply says you can't divide by 0, it's a nice graceful way to handle that error. Alright, so there is a lot of the meat and potatoes of the PHP programming language, and now I'm going to get more into working with input from the users, interacting with databases and such. Alright, so whenever it comes to working with PHP, especially with databases, or if you're just storing files and such, it's very important to sanitize the data coming in. So I created a new file called tut2.php, and here's just some basic HTML. It's a post version of a form, and you can see the output on the right side of the screen. It's not pretty, but I wanted to keep everything very, very simple here. So you can pause your video and type that in, or get the code that is in the description. All right, so let's go and sanitize this. First thing I want to do is check for a valid email. So I'm going to say if is set, and I'm using post this time, like I said. So I'm going to say post email, and that's an array, by the way. So if it is set, now what I want to do is use filter input to make sure that it's valid. Now you're going to be able to use filter input with input get, post, cookie, server, as well as the environment variables. So I'll just say if not filter input, again I'm using input post, and I'm specifically checking email that is being passed inside of it. And then I'm going to say that I want to validate that this is indeed an email. And the message I'll print here in this situation is that the email isn't valid. And then I wouldn't store it, I wouldn't touch it, I wouldn't do whatever I wanted. All right. Else, if this comes back, I can then say, make sure this is a break statement, throw this in and say that it is valid. So they got that all set. Of course, I have to throw my PHP tags inside of here and close that off. Then I could go and throw an email inside of there and hit submit, and you can see it's valid. However, if I type in something that isn't valid, you can see it comes back as isn't valid. All right, so that's one way to check if an email is valid or not. And you're going to see way more as the tutorial continues. I can also come in and verify if these numbers here are actually numbers. How I can do that is I'll say if is set and post is what I'm checking again. And I'm going to check number 1, which of course is coming from up here. See number 1, number 2. That's where those are coming from. And then I'll say and not empty. And again, check the same value, post. But in this situation, I'll do number 2. So 2 different ways of checking. Then I'm going to say number 1 is equal to, and I'm going to call filter input again. Again, input, post, and number 1 is what I'm working with this time. And here what I can do is filter and sanitize and make sure this is a float. And then also I'll say filter, flag, allow fractions. And I'm going to do the same thing for number 2. So it'll sanitize both of those. Number 2, and change this to number 2. And then what I can do is, let's say, here's another thing that I haven't covered. This is printf, and what it is going to do is return a formatted string. So I can come in and say that I only want this to be 1 decimal place plus, and again 1 decimal place is equal to 0.1f, and then go and throw in those values. Whoops, make sure I put $, number 1, number 2, and then number 1 plus number 2. And another thing we can do is escape output so that we can eliminate any special characters that might be inputted, so that, you know, like a cross-site attack or something like that would be attempted on our site. We can go and get rid of those. I'm going to show you that in another thing, but I'll go output, show you that in another example that will allow you to see better what's going on. And what the heck, why don't I do some more stuff here? I'm also going to show you how to validate a URL. So I'll say is set post, and I'll check the website that's being passed inside of it. And how you're going to validate that, I'll say website is equal to, again, filter input, input post. What am I checking? I'm checking the thing with the name of website, and I can use filter validate URL to see if that's valid. And again, I can go and get this, if that checks out, and maybe I'll go and put website here and then throw website inside of here to see if that checks out, and go and input some information. And I got an error because I typed in fractions instead of fraction. And here, whenever I went and checked this, the email came back as working and the numbers all worked. The website didn't. Let's check this. And if I run that, you can see there is our sample output. And I'm going to show you more later on, but if you want to see all of the other different validations that are available, you can just go to this website right here, or the sanitization filters. Let's just go like this so you can actually see them. You can find those at those addresses. All right, so cool stuff. And I said I was going to give you another example so you can see how HTML special characters work. So I'm going to do that now. So what I'm going to do here is go HTML is equal to a hrefs is equal to hash, and close that off and just type in sample and create a link like that. Then I'll say echo HTML dot and throw a break, of course. Then what I want to do is convert the special characters to HTML so it can be displayed. So I'll say echo HTML special characters con HTML. Throw another break in there. And then what I want to do is strip the tags. So I'll say echo, and let's say that I want to strip all the tags except for, in our HTML that we have there, except for the A tag. Just throw the A in there like that. And then you can see some sample output. And then I can also eliminate all my tags by saying strip tags again, throw the HTML in there, and another break, and then just print that HTML out. And there you can see those 4 examples of how we were able to go in there and sanitize this HTML, or what happens if we did not. All right, so cool stuff. And now what I'm going to do is show you how to set up a database and then how to interact with the database with MySQL and PHP. All right, so now I'm going to set up the database, and you either go to localhost :8080 PHPMyAdmin or localhost PHPMyAdmin. And I show how to set all this up in the installation videos that are in the description. And I'm going to log in as root. And this is what you're going to see. All right, so what we're going to do is create a new database. So over on the left side of the screen, you're going to click on New. And we're going to call it Students. So just type in Students right here and then click on Create. Now what we're going to do is create a table. So we're going to type in Student. And we're going to need 13 columns for this completed table. And then type in Go or click Go. Whenever you do, this is going to pop up, and then we're going to put in all the information that we want to store on all of our students. So I have everything right here. Let me just zoom in. What we're going to do is we're going to put first name, and that's going to be a variable number of characters. And I have a link also to a MySQL tutorial, but if you don't want to watch that, that's also in the description. It goes into detail. But if you don't want to watch that right now, you can just do all this. It's pretty easy to understand. I'm also going to have last name, and again, variable number of characters. This is like a string, a variable number of characters, and a length of 30. Email, again, 60. Street, 50. You can pause your video if you want to type all this in. We're also going to have a city, which is going to be 40 characters. A state. Actually, go in and make this a variable number of characters, and 2. Zip code, medium int. Phone, variable number of characters, 20. Birth date, that's just going to be a date. We're going to have sex, which is going to be an enumerated type, which just means it's going to be a list of potential options, which is either going to be male or female. Date entered is going to be the date in which the student information was entered. Make that a timestamp. Lunch cost is going to be a float. And then student ID is going to be an integer. You're going to want to mark that as unsigned inside of here. And you're also going to want to mark zip code as unsigned right here for attributes. You can also see over here under state, I put as defined and PA. That just means that that is going to be the default PA, Pennsylvania. That's where I live. You're also going to notice here that for is it possible to have null characters, I have this all marked as none. That just means that it's required that a value must be entered. And I put a check here for date entered and lunch cost, meaning that those could be marked as null. Then under student ID down here, you're going to click on this and click on primary, and that is going to be under index, the index column right there. Whenever you do, this is going to pop up. Just click on go, and that's going to be your primary key, which means it's a unique key that every single student will have. Then you can come down in the right-hand corner and click on save. And this is exactly the same on Windows and Mac. Whenever you do, you're going to see the table structure is exactly as you see right there. And you're also going to see that student table is over here under the students database. Now we're going to click on SQL, and we're going to enter a bunch of student information. So you're just going to type in insert into student, which is the table's name, and values, and then put everything in order based off of the order that you listed all of the different items. Down here where it says date entered, just put in now, and it'll automatically go and put in whatever the current time is. And null right here is for student ID, and the student ID is going to be auto incremented, so it'll automatically be created. Then come over here and click on go, and you just inserted your first student into your database. Now I'm going to enter a whole bunch more students, and I'm going to have this also in the description, a link in the description. You'll be able to go and copy this and paste in all this student information. And after you go and cut and paste or type all that in, whatever you want to do, just click on Go, and all that information will be entered. Then you're going to click on the SQL tab once again, and if we type in select star from student, where 1, that is saying that we want to go and get all of the student information. And if we do, we're going to see everything is right here. It's everything that we entered. Go and click on the SQL tab again, and this time we're going to define a class, which is just going to be an identification number and a name. So you could just go create table class, and then it'll be whatever the name of the class is. Again, variable number of characters 30 for a string. It has to be a value, or a value needs to be entered. That's what not null means. And then class ID is just going to be a primary key or a unique number that is going to be associated with this name. And after you enter that, click on Go. And you can see that that was created. And you can also see classes over here on the left, right here. And then I went and added in a whole bunch of different class information. Again, the null value is for the primary key, and whenever you put in null for a primary key, it's automatically generated and it's unique. After you enter all that, click on Go, and you can see that was all entered. And we're going to create another table right here called test. It's going to have a date inside of it. It's going to be whether it's a test or a quiz. It's going to have the class ID associated with this test and a unique primary key that's auto-incremented, that is required, that's going to be automatically generated each time we enter test information. Once again, click Go, and everything will be set up. And I'm going to go and create another one called score. And this is basically, I'm not going to use all the stuff in this database, but it's going to set up a system that's going to allow you to go and experiment with PHP and MySQL even after this tutorial to learn even more. That's why I'm bothering to go into all this. Again, this is going to go and store scores on tests. So you'll have a student ID, an event ID, a score, and then a primary key, which is actually going to be a combination of the event ID and student ID. And then click on Go, and you can see that that went and was created for us, and you can see all the different tables that we've created so far. Again, create or click on SQL tab, type in absence. This is going to record any student absences. Again, student ID, the date of the absence, and then primary key. Going to be based off of the student ID and date, and click on Go. That was entered properly. You can always come in here and get all of the results from any of the different tables just by going select star from and whatever the table name is, and then go and run that. If you ever need to alter a table in some way, you just type in alter table, whatever the table's name is. And what I want to do in this situation is add something called max score. Again, it's an integer. It must have a value. And here I'm saying that I want it to get placed inside of the table after type. Again, click on Go. That was entered properly, and you're going to see that all that information is inside of here. I'm going to go and enter some test information, so insert into test and these values that we have right here, and they must be in the same order as the table information. Once again, click on Go. That's entered also. I'm going to go in here once again and alter the score table this time, and I'm going to say that I want to change event ID into test ID. It's an integer unsigned, not null. Here you can see it's event ID, and then I'm going to click on Go, and now you can see it's test ID. All right, so that's some different ways to mess around and change things in our database. Then I'm going to go and enter a whole bunch of scores. Like I said, you can just go and get all the stuff and copy and paste it inside of there. Those are all the scores for all our students on all the tests. And there is the entire list of all the scores, but like I said, it's better to just copy and paste. And I also entered in the absences, and once again, this is just going to be the student ID and whatever the date was for the absence. And then hit Go again. And that was successful as well. You can tell it's successful because it says 3 rows inserted, and we meant to insert 3 rows. Just to cover a little bit more about working with MySQL, let's say that you decided you wanted to name all of your tables instead of absence to absences, and instead of class to classes, and score to scores, and so forth and so on. Well, you just say rename table and then list all those different things you want to change, and then click on Go. And then you can come in and go and get all of the different information on all of the absences. Click on Go again. Now what we're going to do is go in here and create a new user. So to do so, just click on user accounts, and I'm going to call this user student web. I'm going to say that they're going to operate on the local host. I'm going to type in a password that I can remember. I'm going to say that I want to grant all privileges on database students, which is the database that we're working on. Then I want to scroll down, and I want to say that I want to give this new user the ability to select, insert, and update information in our database. After I do that, come down here and click on Go. And that user is now going to be able to do all of those things. And after you do that, you're going to be able to proceed on to the next part of the tutorial, where we are going to allow you to go and get student information and then eventually update and delete and do so much more. Right, so I'm going to be going and printing out information from the database into a table. And this is a file called main.css, and it's just some basic styling. You can pause your screen and create that file. Very basic styling. And you can see right here exactly what that is going to look like whenever it's set up. So it's just black and white, very, very simple. Then we're going to have a form down here that's going to allow the user to insert new student information. Let's move that aside here for now. So there is main.css. Then I created another file called db_connect.php. And this is going to be the file that's going to be used to connect to our database. So again, we're just going to have our PHP tags. And what we're going to do here is create a PHP data object to work with our database. And we're going to create constants for our user that's going to log in. And it's going to be student web. This is the user that you went and created just a couple seconds ago. And we're also going to store the password inside of this file. So I'm going to call this password. And the password I'm using is turtledove. Please don't use this. This is my password I use in all my tutorials, and there's a chance that it could be on a list somewhere to search for. So just don't use it. Use some other password. Just remember it. Then I'm going to define my data source. So just come in here, and we're going to type in MySQL, and host is equal to localhost. And by using PDO, which is what we're going to be using, it's going to allow our PHP code to actually work with multiple different databases. But of course, I'm going to use MySQL here because it's what's most commonly used. And you just list your database name, which is students. All right, so we have that defined. Now what I want to do is try to connect to the database whenever this file is called. And we'll go db equals new PDO, like I just mentioned a second ago. And what you're going to pass to it is DSN, which is going to say that we're using MySQL, localhost, and the database named students. And then you pass in the user ID as well as the password. And there it is. Now, if we had some sort of problems with that, here is going to be exception handling again. What I want to do is catch that error, and it's going to be a PDO exception. And how we're going to handle this is go error and message is equal to, and we're actually going to have this handled on a separate page, which we're going to create here in a second. Go and get the error message. And then I'm going to include an outside file that I'm going to create like right after I'm done with this. It's going to be called db_error.php, and it's going to jump to this file and go and output some new information. And then after that, we can exit from our database. And that's all we need to do there. Now let's jump over to dberror.php, and it's going to be this file right there. And you can see right here, just basic HTML, just like we had before. I'm going to print out database error, and then to actually go and get that database information, which is the message that was sent over to this page inside of PHP tags. Whoops, I don't know why I did that. PHP, I'm going to just print out our error message. So error. This just makes for a very nice place for me to continually send all potential errors that I get no matter where they occur. And there you go. That's all you need to do. And all those messages will go there and automatically load in database error. Now I'm going to jump into a file called tut3.php. And again, you can see basic HTML that we have here, language. There is a link to our style sheet, which I just showed you a couple minutes ago. Then we're going to have student list, which you're going to see right here. See, student list, there that is. We're going to have a table that is going to have all of our information about all of our students. You can pause your screen, type it in, or go and get the code that's in the description. I'm going to load all of the information using PHP from our MySQL database inside of our table. And then you can see here where we are providing for the option for them to enter new student information and to create a new student. And we're going to go and sanitize all that data and work with it. And you can pause your video, like I said, or go and get it. So there's all that information, just like that. And there it is. I'm going to jump to the top here though, and I'm going to go in and connect to my database. So there's my PHP tags. And to connect to our database, I'm just going to say require db connect.php. This is the file that we just created. And what I want to do here is get my student names. And to do so, you define a MySQL query and basically just run it. So I'm going to say query students is equal to, and select is what we're going to use to get all of our student names. And star means I want all of them from the students table. And I'm going to say that I want to order by the student ID. So there is the query. It is exactly the same as a regular MySQL query. Now we're going to use prepared statements to execute all of our queries. And this guy right here is going to create a PDO statement object. So I'm going to call it, there we are, student statement. And that's equal to our database and prepare and query students, and pass in that query that we have. Then to execute our query, I'm just going to say student statement, paste that inside of there, and execute. Then what I want to do after I issue that is I want to return an array that is going to have all of the results, or all of our students. I'm going to store that inside of students. Again, student statement, little arrow, and we'll call fetch all. And I'll be getting into object-oriented programming with PHP in a little bit, so you'll understand a little bit better what some of those things do, what the arrows mean and such. Then what I want to do is allow a new SQL statement to be able to be executed. So I'm going to put student statement again, and how you do that is you call close cursor, and then we'll be able to issue more queries. All right, so this is just basic HTML that you see right here. So I'm going to come down inside of here, and then right here is where I'm going to fetch all of the student information that I just asked for. So I'm going to tab in here, again, PHP, and then inside of it, I'm going to go tr. Actually, I'm going to do this in a slightly different way. Let's go and put this all in one line. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to call for each of the students inside of there using for each. So I'm going to say for each students, that's the name of our array, as student, and we're going to be able to access all this information. Put a colon right there. And then after this, I'm going to list out all my table rows and get all that individual information. So I want to print out all of the individual column data. So I'm going to go td and PHP echo and student ID. If I want to get that information, just use the same name as I use in my database. And make sure this says echo. Put a semicolon there, and then close off that tag, and then close off this tag. All right. And then we're going to be doing pretty much the same thing for every other piece of student data that's in the database. Let's go and grab it. So this is going to be first name. So just first name, exactly like you had in your database. And this is going to be last name. And you know what? Let's do something a little bit nicer. Instead of, well, why is that listed as that? Whatever, let's just get rid of it. All right, so instead of doing first name and last name in individual tables, like I said here, name. So what I want to do is actually combine these. So I'm going to say first name, colon, put a space inside of there, colon, and then student, and then this is going to be last name inside of here, like that. And then it closes off, and then I'm going to copy this guy right here. So it's going to put them all in the same box. I'm also going to get the email, and the street, and the city, and the state, the zip code, and phone number. And I'm just putting in all the same exact things as we have with our database way of referencing this stuff. Birth date, underscore date, and the sex of the student, and the date entered, and then finally lunch cost. So lunch cost. And then to end this, I'm going to put in tr to close our table row. And then after that, I need to mark the end of my for each loop by saying PHP end for each, semicolon, close that, and that's just the for each block is this guy right here, and that's just the end of it. And that's all that I need to do. And I have a little error, which is say in line 4, and we can see I put equals in there 2 times. All right, and there it looks like it worked. So there are all of the students that I entered into my database, and all of the information looks like it's all good. And here we have the ability to enter a new student. And let's just move this over here. And you'll see up next, I'm actually going to create a file called addstudent.php. Grab all that information, sanitize it, and store it in my database. All right, so now in addstudent.php, I'm going to handle some pretty serious validation of this data that we're going to get here where they try to enter a new student. So type in PHP, of course. Then what I want to do is get all of my data that has been input. So I'm going to say first name is equal to, and I'm going to use filter input here, just like we have previously. And it's post, and what we're specifically getting is first name, of course. And we're going to validate all of this information. So of course, I'm also going to do the same thing with last name. If I can, there we are. And this is last. We're also going to get our email. So change this to email, and change this, of course, to email. And I could go and do the validation with the email like I covered previously, but I'm going to show you how to use regular expressions to validate email. And let's get street. And we're going to do this for everything else. So city and city, state and state, zip code and zip code, and phone number. Again, we're going to validate all of this. Birth date and birth date, sex and sex, lunch cost and lunch cost. And then I'm also going to create a timestamp for whatever now is. I'm going to call this date entered. And how you do that is just go date, and then we're going to say year, month, day, hour, minutes, and seconds. And now what I want to do is verify that everything has been entered. So I'm going to say if first name. So I'm showing you multiple different ways to verify data. I'm positive I'm going to get comments that say, you shouldn't do it that way, but I'm trying to show you every way of doing things. That's my thing. I try to show you everything that you may ever see so that whenever you see it, you'll understand what's going on. And now we're properly verifying data here for the first time. And city also inside of here. Just verifying that null, that that there actually is a value for all of these things. State, same thing. And zip code as well. And phone. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but kind of have to. Otherwise, you can just watch the whole thing, hit pause, type it in, or get the code, whatever you want to do. Birth date, sex, and lunch cost. And that's all. Well, I'm going to actually change this to lunch cost. Change this to false. All right, so we got everything here. Now, if this comes back, now what I'm going to do is print an error message here in this situation. So error, just like we did before, and then I'll pass it to our error page that's going to handle it. And I'll just say all values not entered. And let's throw a break inside of there, because we're going to have other error messages that might pop up. And just like we did before, we'll say include db error PHP to get that page to open. And now what I want to do is use regular expressions that are going to validate the information further. And I'm going to do this outside. Well, it's going to be as an else if clause. And regular expressions, if you don't know, are just codes that you use to match patterns. So for example, I'm not going to get too far. I'm going to show you examples of regular expressions, but I'm not going to get into tons of detail about them, because I could do an entire hour and a half long tutorial, and I have, just on regular expressions. But basically what you do is you're going to say preg match is the function you're going to use, and then you're going to define with a / everything you're going to accept. So for first name, what I want to say I want to accept, and you're going to put the things you're going to accept inside of brackets. I'm going to say I will accept letters A through Z, lowercase, letters A through Z, uppercase, and that's it. And I expect the first name to be between 3 and 30 characters in length. And then this $ signifies the end of the string, and that closes off that regular expression. And then we put inside of here what we're checking. So I'm going to say first name is what I want to check. And that is how that operates. So if not, that's what this is. So if it doesn't match that pattern, what do I want to do? Well, I'm going to go and get our error message here and print that out on the screen that there's something wrong with the first name. So I'm going to come in here and I will say first name not valid, and everything else is exactly the same. And then we're going to do another else if after that. And for the last name, I'm basically going to do exactly the same thing. So we'll just put last name inside of there, and then I'll change this to last name. So last name not valid. Again, we're going to do the same type of thing for our email. And I'm going to save some time here because I'm actually going to use built-in stuff to verify the email. So I'm going to say else if and get rid of this thing right here and instead say filter variable. And I told you where to find all these earlier in the tutorial series. And let's just go and get rid of all of this excess stuff right here. And inside of this guy, I'm going to put email. And it's going to go and verify it for me. So I'll say validate email. All right, so there we are. And then I can say email not valid if we have some type of issue with that. And then we can do another else if. And this one is going to pertain to the street being valid. And I'm going to use a regular expression in this situation. So let's just change this to street. And then I have to create a regular expression that's going to match for my street. This caret symbol here is going to represent the beginning of a string, and this represents the end of a string. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a tutorial on using regular expressions here. I'm also going to say that I can accept numbers 0 through 9. I can accept spaces. I can accept commas. I can allow hashes. I can allow some types of single quotes, for example, and also I'm going to say that I can allow periods. All right, so we got all those different things inside of there, and here I'm going to say that I'm going to allow up to 50 characters inside of our streets, and that's pretty much everything's fine there. So I can say here street not valid, and then we'll go and do another one. So throw this inside of here. Now what I want to check is the city and see if that's valid or not. So I'm going to come in here and I'll say city. And the only thing I'm going to have some issues with is if there's any type of odd symbols. But, you know, I think you get the gist of what's going on here. Put some spaces inside of there and we can say something like 2 through. And I think the biggest city that I know of is 58 characters long. I think it's in like Norway or something. So there that is. And that's city. And I can say city not valid, and we'll do another one. So what else do I want to check for? Oh, I want to check for states, and this one's actually going to be kind of crazy. All right, so what this is going to do is match the beginning of a string again, and then it's going to go through and match any A's that are followed with K, L, R, and Z, or any C's followed with AOT, or, and I think you get the gist of it, and this is going to verify 2-digit state representations. All right, and that's basically what that does. And that's going to be 0 or 1, or 0 or more. And this guy here is going to represent 1 or more of what follows. So that's what we got for verifying our states. I know it's a little bit crazy. What else are we going to verify here? Well, I'd like to also verify zip codes. This is going to be a really simple one. So let's go and close this off at the end so I don't forget that. And this is going to be zip codes. And for zip codes, I'm going to say that I'm going to accept just 0 through 9. And I'm going to accept only 5 numbers. And that could cause some issues if they put spaces on the side of there. But whatever. This is just a basic overview so that you get the gist of how to do this stuff. And that should be good. And what else are we going to do? Let's go and close that off. I'm also going to want to verify telephone numbers. And telephone numbers are going to be a little bit weird here as well. Again, we're going to say that we're going to accept parentheses and numbers, which is going to represent the number 1 right here. Then we're going to accept like dashes and spaces and dots. And we're going to accept a parentheses here. It could be one of those things, but we don't necessarily have to have them. Then we're going to have 3 digits, and then we're going to have 3 more digits. Again, we're going to accept dashes, spaces, and dots, and then once again 4 digits after that. And that is the gist of the telephone number definition. Birth date is going to be rather simplistic. I'm going to say that I am going to accept just a certain number of digits, as well as dashes and spaces. So I'm going to say that I will accept 0 through 9, obviously. And then I'm also going to accept dashes, and I'm going to accept spaces. And I'm going to say that this should be something like 8 to 12 in length. And then change this to birth date. And there's birth date. And then here we can say birth date not valid. And we're almost done with these guys. What else are we going to verify? We're going to verify sex. So for sex, I'm going to put sex inside of here. And for sex, I'm only going to allow either the characters M or F. So I can come in and say MF and MF. And this is only going to be 1 of those is what I'm accepting. And otherwise, I will say sex not valid. And then that's basically it. And after this, after we make it through all those, what I can do is try to insert the students into my database. So I'm going to have to go require once, just make sure this only loads 1 time, and this is going to be used to connect to our database, just like we connected to our database previously. And then I have to create my query, just a MySQL query again, and this is going to be an insert query, insert into the students table. And then I list out all of the individual things that I want to place in there. And this has to be in order. So this is going to have to match the values that you're going to see here in a minute. In order, obviously. If you put them out of order, you're going to get errors. So street and city and state and zip code. And if you made it this far in this tutorial, please take a second to tell me in the in the comment section, because sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself. So sex, and what else are we going to do here? Date entered is going to be another one, and lunch cost is going to be another one, and student ID is going to be the final thing. And then after that, what I can do is I'll say values, and then the values are going to be placed inside of here. So I can say values, and then I'm going to list out everything. So I'm going to say first name. Again, everything's going to be exactly the same as what we had before. So why don't I just copy all of this stuff right here and go in here and paste it inside. So there's all those, and then all I need to do is put a colon in front of every single one of these. and all of this information will be transposed from what we have been verified above, or what has been verified up above. So colon, colon, colon. And these are going to add all of these parameters to my statement. Okay, so there we go. Got all that set up. And we got our query all set up. Now what I need to do is create my PDO statement object. And I'm just going to call this STM. And we're going to go and get our database and prepare our query with prepare. And there's our query. There we go. And then I need to bind all of my values to these parameters that are right here, what I defined. So how I do that is go STM and then bind value, and then we'll just list them all again. So a lot of typing the same stuff over and over again. And first name, and we're going to do that for every single value that we have again. So we'll do the same thing for last name, and email, street, and street, and city, and state, and your guess is right, state, zip, and zip, phone, and once again phone, birth date, and birth date, sex and sex, date entered, and you remember that we created this one based off of whatever the current time was. We're also going to have lunch cost, and I set this up on purpose so that there's a lot of additional things you can practice with this database, and student ID. And for the student ID, actually what I'm going to do is put null inside of it. So I'll say null, and then what you do is you say PDO param, and this is an integer. After you have all of that set up, then you need to execute this query, and then I'm also going to verify if the query was successful, because this function is going to return true or false based off of if it was successful or not. Something you don't necessarily have to do. I just want to show you what it looks like. So you call execute, it returns true or false. And then we need to close this so that we'll be able to go and issue other queries if we would like to. Close cursor. And then after that, what we can do, if an error occurs, we can print the error. So I'm going to say if, I'll show you how to do that as well. Now you would probably display this in a nicer way, but I just want to show it to you and keep everything as simple as possible. I'm going to use print R again so that we can just go and print this information out. This is actually an array that's returned, error info, and this is an array, so I want the second part of it, which is the main error message, and that closes off that part. Then I also want to display all the student information in the table. So where is that? Require once. There it is. Let's go and get this. And down inside of here, outside of that, I'm going to go require once, and I'm going to go and query the students, and again select everything from students, order by student ID, and we'll be able to put those in that table. And I need to prepare this. So once again, student statement, call execute on it, go and get our students array by going student statement and call fetch all on it to get all of those results. Close the cursor so we can issue other queries, and that's it. And I think just about every single thing else here is going to be okay. This is going to be the table where we go and get that information. And I'm going to jump over into tut3 and steal this information. So this is going to go and get all that information from our database and put it in our table. So I'm just going to copy that, jump back over into add student, and paste that inside of here. There that is. Then as far as I know, that should be everything we need. And I went and entered some information inside of here, and let's see if it works. And we have an error here on line 65. I knew after all that code there'd be something wrong, so let's go and see line 65. I need to put 2 colons inside of there. Let's see if that's okay now. Reload. And it's going to say, yes, I want to resubmit. Database errors. All values not entered. What was wrong with that? Let's see if there's something else going on here. Undefined variable student statement. Line 74. I probably forgot a $sign. No, I didn't. A couple little errors here. Forgot to put from inside of there. And then I forgot to go student statement. Paste this inside of here. And then I need to go and prepare my statement. So database, prepare, and then query students inside of here. There we go. And let's test it again and reload it. And all values not entered is the error message I got. Let's try it again. I think I have everything entered here. Let's go add student. All values not entered. And I see that I put last name incorrect. Little bug. And let's just test it. Still all values not entered. This guy right here should be lunch. So let's change that to lunch. And actually on top of that, I'm going to filter it to make sure it is a float. So filter, validate, float. And try again. Still not working. Try again reloading the page. This is actually birth date inside of the form HTML. That's what caused that error. And let's give it another try. And it looked like it worked. All right, so sorry about all those errors, but we finally got it to work and everything looks good. And you can go and test those validations by putting in improper information, but I'm certain that they work. All right, so now we learned how to add students. Now we're going to learn how to update students. All right, so for update student.php, I'm basically just going to copy add student and go and change a couple things. One thing I need to do is provide for the option to get the student ID. And I am just going to name this student ID. And I cut out the validation with the regular expressions. Obviously, in the real world, you would keep those in. But I just did it to make the file size a little bit more manageable. And I want to verify that this is an integer. And of course, I am going to need to verify that they entered a student ID here, because that's how we're going to allow them to change it. So I'm going to say student ID equal to null. And right here is where I cut out all of the verification of the regular expressions. Definitely go in there and keep those in though. All right, so, and I'm going to create a new query that is, once again, just a MySQL statement. So students, so I want to update my students table. And then what you do, whoops, what are you doing here? So students, like that. And then what we're going to do here is I am going to say, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say set first name to be equal to first name again. I'm adding those parameters. And then I'm going to do that again for all of the different inputs, except I'll just say last name like this equal to and last name. And do that for all of the other different pieces of data that we're working with. So email, street, city, state, zip code, phone number, birth date. That's birth underscore date, right? Yes. And birth date again, sex, and lunch cost. And then finally, whoops, I'm not going to put a comma there. Finally, I will say where, whoops, make sure there is a space here after that. However, where student ID is equal to student ID. And if we get an error, it's probably going to be because of spacing or something inside of here, but we can easily fix that. All of this is going to be the same. We're going to prepare our query. We're going to validate all of this information as well as bind those parameters. Student ID down here, instead of going and generating a new student ID, we are going to instead have it be the provided student ID. Again, we're going to execute that, close the cursor so that we can issue further ones, handle any errors and output them on the screen. We are then going to go and get a student list so we can populate a table with it. Again, all the generic HTML. Here's the student list table that has all of the students listed. Cycle through the students, print them out inside of the table just as we did previously. Do I have an ID inside here? Yes, I have ID right there, and this does get the student ID. And then the final thing I'm going to allow them to do is to delete a student. So I'm just going to add this form here. I'm going to create a new file called deletestudent.php. It's posted. And with this, we're going to get a student ID, and that's the student ID. And whenever they click the button, it's going to delete a student. So let's save that, and let's see if it worked. So update a student. Who I want to update is going to be Sally Small. So I'll just type in 16. And let's change this from Sally Small to Sam Small, just to do something. And male. And let's just go and give them a generic birthday. And there we go. That is all that information. Let's try to update it. Warning. And what did we do wrong? Line 49. And I'm just going to go in here and make sure there's spaces everywhere, because I think that's probably what caused the error. Here, this isn't going to matter because this is all separated with commas. But down inside of here where we have lunch cost, I want to verify that there's a space inside of there. See space, and reload it, see if that fixed it. Nope, still got an error. Let's figure out what this is. It says 48, still getting an error with this, so let's figure out why. Oh, I see. I didn't put date entered because I would want to keep that the same as whenever the student was first entered. So let's go and get rid of this line right there. Save it, reload. And let's see if it worked, and Sam Small. And everything else looks good. All right, so we got that all set up, and now all we need to do is figure out how to delete students. And once again, this is going to be very similar, and I call this delete_student.php. And we're going to come in here, and we're going to have our PHP code. But we're only going to get one input, which is going to be the student ID in this situation. So we're not going to have to type a lot of this information in here. One thing that I do want to copy, however, is going to be this part right here. So I'm just going to copy that. Jump over into delete students. Again, we're going to have PHP code, obviously. We're going to get the data input, which is just going to be student ID. There's nothing else going to be passed inside of it. I'm going to say filter input and make sure that all that they provided to us is an integer. And that's going to be student ID from the HTML form. And how we validate that is say filter, validate, and int. Again, we're going to verify that everything's been entered, which there's only one thing. So we're just going to say student ID equal to null. And in the situation that student ID is null, we are going to print out our error message. And else, otherwise, we are going to require once, and this is going to be our database connection. So db connect, whoops, what'd that do? Connect.php, and then I need to create my query for deleting. So I'm going to say query is equal to, and delete from students, and I'm going to say where student ID is equal to, and it's going to be our student ID. And then I need to prepare this, and let's just go to here, and there's the query and prepare. And then I need to bind a value to it. So I'll jump back over here, paste that inside of there. There is our query and bind. This is going to be student ID. And once again, student ID. And I need to go and execute that code and close it and so forth and so on. So let's jump over into update again, go after this, and we'll go grab all of this stuff. So execute the query, print any errors and all of that, and then get all the information for the student database. So we'll come in here and right after that, put this inside of there. And I probably have an extra curly bracket here now. And yes, I do. So I'm going to get rid of that extra curly bracket right there and save that. All of the HTML is largely going to be the same. So I'm going to go over to update student, and I'm literally just going to copy all of the HTML because it also has the delete student part here at the end. So this is all the stuff from the last guy. And then we can just come in here and select all of this and get rid of it and replace it, I guess I should say. Save it. See if we have any errors. So here's update student. Let's go and reload that. Let's just cancel that. Student ID, and let's say we want to delete 16, delete student, and we deleted them. All right, so there we go. We're able to update and delete and insert and do all of that. And now I want to show you an example of how we can use cookies. Now, cookies, I'm sure you're aware, I created a new file called cookie_test.php, and I loaded it over here inside the browser. Cookies are going to be used to store values in the user's browser. Now, it's important to understand that you're probably sure you understand this, but I'll say it anyway. You can't expect that users will have cookies enabled, but they sometimes are useful, and I'm going to show you exactly how we can use them. So what we're going to do first is say PHP, and to create a cookie, you're going to say set cookie. And you're going to provide it with a name. I'm just going to call this my cookie. And then I'm going to put nothing inside of there. Then I'm going to put whatever data I want to store. So I'm just going to say sample value. Then you're going to put time inside of here. And I'm going to say plus 86400. That's the number of seconds in a day. And if I want to allow any page from my site to be able to access it, I just put a / inside of quotes, and there we go. We just created a cookie. And that's basically simple. I mean, that's how they work. To delete the cookie, what you would do is you would come in and do something like use the same exact cookie, except you would say that the expiration date would be less than a day. So you basically just roll it back to a time that is earlier than what you originally set it for expiration, and it deletes the cookie. So pretty simple. Now what we're going to be able to do is let's go and open up some PHP inline here, and if you want to check if a cookie is set, you can go if not is set, and your cookies are going to be stored in a cookie array, and we can look for my cookie. Obviously, you should give it a name that's, kind of unique so you can locate it. And then what you're going to do is in this situation, we're going to say the cookie is not set because we were unable to locate our cookie. And else, if that goes back as false or true, depending upon how you look at it, well, in that situation, we know that our cookie is set. And let's come in and let's say cookie value, and let's output that cookie value on the screen. Let's go like this and get our cookie value. How you get the value, underscore, you just access the cookie array again and say my cookie dot, and go and output that on the screen. So let's go over here, reload it. Cookie not set, let's reload it again. Cookie is set, and it has the value of sample value. And that's about how complicated cookies are. So there's a cookie example. And now what I'm going to do is show you how object-oriented programming works in PHP. All right, so we're going to go into htdocs, create a new file, and I'm just going to call this oopphp.php. That's perfectly fine. Go and throw in our HTML and close off our body tag and close off our HTML tag. All right, and I'm going to create some objects. Now, object-oriented programming, like every other language, is going to just allow us to model real-world objects and inside of code. And like every object has attributes such as height and weight and such, and everything also has capabilities such as being able to run and eat. Well, with object-oriented programming, we model these things. Attributes are going to be called, they're going to be called fields, and capabilities are going to be called methods or functions. All right? And this is the same, a field is the same as a variable, it's just related to objects, and methods are just like functions. So let's go and create one. I'm just going to create a simple animal object. So how you do that is you use a class, which is the blueprint for what you're trying to model. And then we're going to define some attributes. So I'm going to mark this name for our animal as protected. And what that means is there's all kinds of different ways. You can say that this is private. And if you mark it as private, that means that only functions or methods inside of your class are going to be able to access this data. Now, as you're going to see later, we're actually going to be able to create new classes and inherit things like name inside of it automatically. But if you do that, you're not, and you have this marked as private, you're not going to be able to inherit the name. So I want to be able to inherit the name. So I'm going to mark this as protected. And you could also have it marked as public, and anything that is marked as public is going to be available. This data, this value for name, is going to be available to anybody who has access to objects created of type animal. Don't worry, I'll give you a lot of examples here and all of this will make sense. So we're going to have a name for our animal. We are also going to have a favorite food for our animals. And what else? We will also have a sound that our animal is going to make. And we will also have an identification number for all of our animals. And a static attribute is going to be shared by every single object. So every single time anybody accesses this static value, it is going to be the same for every animal object ever created. And whenever any of the animal objects change this value, it is going to change for every animal object. So it's a shared value that's available to every animal object. Any constants that you define inside of your class are going to also be shared by every single object. And you can define functions or methods inside of your class in exactly the same way as you do outside. So let's say we wanted to do something like getName, and we wanted to provide that name. Well, we would just say return, and then you would say this, and that just means that's a reference to the object, because we create the object after we create the animal class. So inside of the class, we don't know what the object's name is. So if we want to refer to the object itself, we use this, and I'm going to say name, and that's going to return whatever the animal's name is. You're also going to have functions called constructors that are going to be set up to initialize or set values for all of your animal objects that are created. And this is what they look like. Function, construct, and let's say that we'd like to go and generate a random value and assign it to ID. We could just go rand, and let's say we want it to be between 100 and 1 million. Have to be a pretty big animal shelter to have any issues with that. We could then come in here and say echo, and this, get the ID, and then say something like has been assigned. Throw a break statement inside of there. And you're going to be able to access static attributes like number of animals by just going animal and then colon colon. And what we want to do is get our number of animals and increment it because we just created a new animal type. A destructor is going to be called whenever all references to our objects have been unset. So we can go and do things, destruct, and we could just output some information like this, and whatever the animal's name is being destroyed. So there's another message that we can have. You're also going to be able to use what are called magic setters and getters. And these are going to be called whenever you try to assign a value to an attribute. So we could say function and get, and what we're going to specifically assign here is the name for our animal. And we can output a message on the screen, asked for and name, just so we can have some output popping up here. And then what this is going to do is return the animal's name. If you would like to go and check that a value trying to be assigned to your attributes is valid, you could do that inside of a setter function. Let's create a setter function, set, and this is going to be receiving name as well as value. And then what we can do is we could say switch and name, and this is going to allow us to set things like our name, our favorite food, or the sound for our animal types. So we could say case name, and then this name is equal to value, and throw a break in there after that. And let's tab these in so it looks a little neater. And let's copy this a couple times. And did I forget to put PHP around? Yes, I did. So let's come in here like this. PHP, and let's close off. Let's get rid of that. Come down here, close off that tag. And then if this is favorite food, there we are, favorite food, then we will assign favorite food to whatever value was passed inside of here. And if we received sound, whoops, get rid of these dollar signs inside of there. Yeah, and there, and change this to sound. And change this to sound. And then we could throw a default inside of here that just says default, and echo out onto the screen in this situation that we were unable to find whatever they were trying to print out on the screen. So not found, like that. And otherwise, outside of the case statement, we could come in here and say echo set name to, and whatever our value was that they were trying to use with a break statement. All right, so there we go. I'm going to create another function, and it's going to be called run. And I'm just going to say echo this and get the name for our animal. And I'll say runs like that. Go create a couple more. This function I'm actually going to override, and I'm going to show you how to create a function here that cannot be overridden. If you do not want a function to be overridden in a class that inherits from animal, just put final in front of it. And what is good is the name of that function. And I could say something like echo running is good, just to do something silly. Another thing we can do is we can use a function that is called, and there's two underlines there, toString, and we can use it to define what prints whenever the object is called to print. So what I'm going to say, I'm going to print out a little message or story about my animal. I'm going to say that I want the name, and we can say says, and then go and get whatever the sound is for our animal. And then we can say, give me some, and then after that, go and get the animal's favorite food, and then we can have the animal say my ID is, and I'll put that on the screen as well by once again going this ID and total animals also is equal to, and we can print out our animal number, and we'll just say number of animals. And anything else? No, I can't think of anything. So we'll throw some break statements inside of there, and there we go. And you can also define inside of here static methods. So static function, let's just have the animal be a animal that can count numbers. So we'll say, or add numbers. So it's going to get 2 numbers, and then it's just going to return those numbers added together, num1 plus num2. And now let's test out our animal. So we have our opening curly brace, which is for this guy right here. And directly outside of here, let's just go and close that. If I want to create a new animal object, I can say, let's say I want to have this be animal1. I just say new, and whatever the class name is. So animal, there we are, just created one. And now I can say animal1, and if I want to assign the name to it, I just say spot. And again, animal1, if I want to assign a favorite food, just do this and say spot likes to eat meat, and animal1, and define spot sound to be equal to rough. And whenever we actually call these, actually what is being called is the setter, this guy up here. So this is the function being called in that situation. Now what I'll do is say echo and animal1, and to get its name, I just do that. And I could say something like, why don't we just go and copy this up here? So it's exactly the same as this. So I'm going to say that I want to copy this whole entire thing. It's not exactly the same. So we'll go echo, echo. And instead of putting this inside of here, I will instead say animal1. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Animal1, and here, and animal1. And total number of animals, this is going to stay as animal because that's a class, field, or variable, whatever you want to call it. And if you want to be able to access the constant that we threw inside of there, I can say something like favorite number, and then just refer to it with its class name. So animal, and pi, and break, and there we go. And let's get OOP PHP.php. Oops, got an error here. Figure out what we did. We have an extra quote inside of there. Get rid of that. And we got another little bug. Oh, and it's the same thing because I copied that. Reload it. You can see here a value has been assigned, and we got another little bug. Let's go and figure that out. And I forgot to call this number of animals. There we go. All right, so reload it, and there we can see. We set the name to spot, we set the favorite food to meat, rough, asked for name, asked for sound, asked for favorite food, asked for ID, and then we print it out. Spot says rough, give me some meat, my ID is this number, total number of animals is 1, favorite number is this, and spot is being destroyed, poor spot. All right, so now we're going to take all of that class, and we're going to create a new class called dog, and it's going to inherit all the methods and all the variables and fields inside of the animal class. So to inherit, I'm right after the animal class. I'm going to create a new class, and it's going to be called dog. And to inherit from animal, you just say extends animal. That's it. That's all you do. Now what we can do is, let's say we wanted to come in here and change this run function. We can override it inside of here, and everything else will still work. So throw that in there, and we can just say runs like crazy, just to change it a little bit. Everything else is basically the same. And even though this is now a dog, what we're going to do is we're going to copy all of this stuff that we had right here, except we're going to do it for our dog class. So there is animal, here is dog. So I'm going to call this animal2, and it's going to be new dog, and this is going to be 2 also. And we're going to give it a name of Grover, and animal2, and just change all of these 1s into 2s. And let's say that Grover's favorite food is mushrooms, and he says grr instead of rough, and this will be animal2 in this situation. Says, and then we'll just have to change all these to animal2, and animal2, and animal2. Total number of animals, we're going to set this to dog instead of animal. Might be surprised by the results there. Well, it's just dog with lowercase. And let's get rid of the favorite number, it doesn't matter anymore. Run that. And you're going to see all this stuff is the same, except now we created Grover. Everything continues to work exactly as before, and you can see that Grover's being destroyed and Spot is being destroyed here at the end, and also that the number of animals comes back as 2. And even though we go and created a brand new class, we're still, every single time, that's still going to be considered an animal, even though it's a dog. And that's the reason why we get that additional information. Another thing is, remember we overrode the run function? Well, we can come in here and we can say animal1, and let's say that we want to call our run function on animal1, and we want to do the same thing on animal2, right like that. Whenever we run those, you're going to see that the first one runs right here, Spot runs. However, Grover runs like crazy. All right, so you can see we were able to override that. And just remember that if a method is marked as final, it cannot be overridden. Also, additional information, if we want to go and just see what happens if we try to print out the animal like this, animal1 and animal2. Let's just go and copy that and change it to 2. And this is 2. And we run it. That it's just going to automatically print out whatever we put in that toString method we had. Okay, so cool stuff. Now, PHP, like many other languages, are not going to allow you to inherit from multiple different classes. So if you want to get a similar result, what you're going to have to use is an interface instead. And how you create an interface is just type in interface. And let's say that we want to give our animals and dogs the ability to sing. Well, what we would define here is the functions that must be implemented by any class that inherits from this interface. So what we're going to say is if you're going to inherit from Singable, that what you need to do is implement a function called sing inside of your class. And let's go and implement that. So if you want dog to implement that interface, you say implements Singable. And that means that you must now create a function called sing. So I'm going to go and create a public function, and it's going to be called sing. It's like creating a contract, and there's a lot. I could add an extra hour or two to talk about PHP. I have other tutorials that cover interfaces and so forth. I'm going to pass on that for this tutorial. Unless you guys really want me to do it, then leave a comment and say, talk about all of this in another video. So I'm just going to say whatever this dog's name is going to sing, and then I'll say bow wow wow. Okay, so there that is. Then I need to, if I also want the animals to do the same thing, again, just go implements Singable. And why didn't I label that as an uppercase letter? I should have. Yes, it's there. All right, so back up here, implements Singable. So there's Singable, and like I said before, you need to implement that. And where do we want to do it? Let's just do it here at the very bottom. So here it is, sing, and we'll just have him say grr, grr, grr. All right, and there that is. And that is how we can enforce contracts in which our classes implement certain functions. And then we can come down inside of here, and if we wanted to output that information, we could just go and let's get rid of this, get rid of these two. Let's get rid of all of these. Or actually, let's not get rid of that one. Let's just get rid of this. And if we want to call the sing function, we could just go sing and do it for both of these guys. And there we go. And Grover sings bow wow wow. And oh, there's Spot sings grr grr grr. All right. Another thing that you'd be able to do is, let's say we created a function. We could actually create a function. And this gets a little bit into why interfaces are really cool. I can say make them sing and mark this as singable, which is the interface. And it can be any singing animal that implements that interface. So animal, and it's going to make them sing. So we'll just go, hey, singing animal, and have it sing. Just by going like this, and this gets into some really cool things you can do with PHP. Another thing that's often brought up is polymorphism. And the way that it works is basically what we're saying here is that through polymorphism, we want different classes that share a superclass. So for example, how dog is going to share all the values inside of animal. We want them to be able to act as animals. However, in the situations in which the dog is different, so for example, where we have them runner or whatever, we want them to be able to act as their different selves even though they are animals. Let's bring up make them sing again. So we'll just bring that there, and let's do that with our different animal types. So I'm going to go and call make them sing and pass in animal, animal 1, and also make them sing again, make them sing, and animal 2. So here's another example of how we can pass in different classes and also have them both work. All right, so neat stuff. And I guess just about the only thing I didn't do is call the static function that I have inside of my animal class, which is somewhere here. Where did I put it? Yeah, add these. So I'll show you how to call static functions inside of a class. So we'll say echo, and 3 plus 5 is equal to, and then outside of that, you just call animal, whichever the class name is. We call add these, and we pass in the values of 3 and 5. Close that off and reload it. And you can see that it was able to make that calculation. Oh, and one more thing, and this will end the whole entire tutorial that's absolutely huge. If you want to go in and check if object is of a certain type, so I could say, is it an animal? How you would do that is, let's try animal 2. So I'm going to say animal 2 instance of animal, and I'll use a ternary operator here, and I will say true and or false, and do this and that, and then echo out whether it was indeed true or false. And that will end the entire tutorial. Hopefully you guys found it useful, and you can see here it comes back as true. All right, so there you go, guys. That is an insane amount of information about both PHP as well as MySQL. If you actually stayed here and watched the whole video, thank you for that. Please tell me in a comment. I would greatly appreciate it. And like always, please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.